The night the sky went dark. The first sign was the moon. It was full that night, hanging over Brooklyn like a silver coin in a black ocean. Then, without warning, it dimmed, not hidden by clouds, not eclipsed, but as if something had swallowed its light. Steve Rogers was on patrol, moving across the rooftops when it happened. One moment the city was bathed in pale glow. The next it was plunged into a darkness so deep it felt alive. And then came the sound, a low, resonant hum, like the vibration of a massive engine buried beneath the earth. It rattled the glass in the windows, made the air feel heavier. Steve stopped, scanning the skyline. That's when he saw it, a ripple in the sky. Not lightning, not smoke, but a distortion like heat haze spreading outward from a single point above Manhattan. And from that ripple, something began to fall. It wasn't debris. It wasn't rain. It was shadow, not the absence of light, but a substance thick, fluid, and black as ink, pouring down from the sky in tendrils. Wherever it touched, the streetlights went out. The neon signs died. The windows went dark. Steve leapt from the rooftop, landing in the street below. The shadows were already moving, crawling along the pavement like living things. They slid up walls, across cars, into open doors. A scream cut through the night. He sprinted toward it, shield raised. Around the corner, a woman was backed against a wall, a tendril of shadow coiling toward her like a snake. Steve slammed his shield into it. The impact sent a shock wave through the air, and the shadow recoiled, hissing. It didn't retreat far. Instead, it split into two smaller tendrils, both darting toward him. He blocked one with his shield, but the other wrapped around his arm. The cold was instant, biting deep into his skin. He tore it free and swung the shield in a wide arc, scattering both tendrils into mist. The woman ran. Steve didn't blame her. The hum grew louder. Steve looked up. The ripple in the sky had widened, and now a shape was emerging from it. A massive, jagged silhouette, like a fortress made of black stone and steel, suspended in the air. And standing at its edge was a figure. Tall, armored, cloaked in a mantle of shifting shadow. His face was hidden behind a mask of obsidian, carved into the shape of a jackal's skull. In one hand, he held a long, curved blade that dripped with black fire. When he spoke, his voice carried across the city. Your age of light is over. The Shadowfall begins. The fortress pulsed, and the shadows surged outward in a wave. They weren't just tendrils now, they were shapes. Humanoid but wrong. Too tall, too thin, their limbs bending at impossible angles. Their eyes glowed faintly red, like embers in a dying fire. Steve charged into them. His shield smashed through one, scattering it into smoke, but two more took its place. They moved fast, their bodies flickering between solid and intangible. He fought his way down the street, every blow precise, every movement calculated. But for every shadow he destroyed, more poured in from the sky. Then, without warning, the ground beneath him cracked. A massive clawed hand, made entirely of shadow, burst upward, grabbing him by the leg and yanking him off his feet. He slammed his shield into it, but the grip only tightened. The cold spread up his leg, numbing it. A voice spoke in his mind. You cannot fight the night, soldier. The claw dragged him toward the center of the street, where a swirling vortex of shadow had formed. The air around it shimmered, and Steve realized it wasn't just a hole, it was a doorway. He jammed the edge of his shield into the claw's grip, forcing it open just enough to pull free. Rolling to his feet, he backed away from the vortex. The figure from the fortress was there now, standing at its edge. Up close, the armor was even more intricate, black plates etched with runes that seemed to shift when you looked at them. The jackal mask tilted slightly, studying him. You are the one they call Captain America, the figure said. The last light of a dying world. Steve raised his shield. And you are. The figure stepped forward, the shadows curling around his feet. I am Kaeldar, warden of the Shadow Realm, and I have come to claim this world for the eternal night. Kaeldar moved faster than Steve expected. One moment he was standing still, The next his blade was a blur of black fire. Steve blocked, the impact ringing through his arm. The force drove him back several steps. The shadows around them shifted, forming a circle. The street beyond was gone, replaced by a void of swirling darkness. Steve countered with a shield strike, but Kaeldar flowed around it like smoke, his blade slicing towards Steve's side. Steve twisted, the edge grazing his armor. The cold burned like ice. "You fight well," Kaeldar said, "but you fight for a world already lost." Steve didn't answer. He lunged, slamming his shield into Kaeldar's chest. The blow staggered him, and Steve followed with a kick that sent the warden back toward the vortex. For a moment, it looked like he might fall in, but the shadows surged upward, catching him, lifting him back to his feet. Kaeldar tilted his head. "Interesting. Perhaps I will keep you alive a little longer." He raised his blade, and the shadows surged towards Steve. Then, from somewhere above, a beam of pure white light cut through the darkness, striking the street between them. The shadows recoiled, hissing. Kaeldar looked up. "So, the flame still burns." Steve followed his gaze. High above, on the roof of a nearby building, a figure stood holding a staff topped with a crystal that glowed like a miniature sun. The light from it pushed the shadows back, creating a narrow path through the darkness. The figure called down to him, "Captain, move." Steve didn't hesitate. He sprinted toward the building, the shadows clawing at his heels. Kaeldar didn't follow, not yet. Inside the building, the light was blinding after the darkness outside. The figure lowered the staff, revealing an old man with weathered skin and eyes that burned with determination. "You don't know me," the man said, "but I know you, and I know what's coming." Steve caught his breath. "Start talking." The man set the staff down. "That thing out there, Kaeldar, is the warden of the Shadow Realm. The Shadowfall is his invasion. Once the sky is fully consumed, the shadows will be unstoppable." Steve glanced toward the window. The ripple in the sky was wider now, the fortress looming larger. "How do we stop him?" The old man's expression was grim. "You can't stop him here. You have to go where he came from, into the Shadow Realm itself. And for that, you'll need the Heart of Dawn." Steve frowned. "What is it?" "A relic," the man said. "Older than the warden, older than the realm. It's the only thing that can burn the shadows from the inside out. But it's hidden deep beneath the ruins of the first city where the light was born." Steve tightened his grip on his shield. "Then that's where I'm going." The man shook his head. "It won't be that simple. The path to the heart is guarded by things even the warden fears." Outside, the hum grew louder. The building shook as a massive shadow beast slammed into its side. The old man grabbed the staff. "We're out of time." The wall exploded inward, and Kaeldar stepped through, his blade dripping with black fire. "Found you," he said. Steve raised his shield. The old man raised his staff. The light and the darkness collided, filling the room with a blinding flash. When Steve's vision cleared, the old man was gone, and so was Kaeldar. Only the staff remained, lying on the floor, its crystal still glowing faintly. Steve picked it up. Somewhere in the distance, the hum became a roar. The ruins of the first city. The staff's crystal pulsed faintly in Steve's hand, its light warm but fragile, like a candle in a storm. Outside, the hum that had haunted the city since the Shadowfall began was now a deep, resonant thrum, vibrating through the walls. He stepped into the street. The sky was worse. The ripple had widened into a yawning wound. The fortress above now, so close it seemed to scrape the tops of the tallest buildings. Tendrils of shadow poured down like waterfalls, spilling into the streets and alleys. The old man's words echoed in his mind. The heart of dawn, deep beneath the ruins of the first city. Steve didn't know where the first city was, but the staff seemed to. The crystal's glow shifted, pointing like a compass toward the southern edge of Manhattan. He started moving, keeping to the pockets of light where the shadows hesitated to follow. The streets were unrecognizable. Cars lay abandoned, their windows shattered. Street lamps flickered weakly before dying altogether. The shadows moved like predators, gliding along walls and across rooftops, always watching. Twice they attacked. The first time, they came as a swarm of thin, spindly creatures with too many joints, their movements jerky and insect-like. Steve's shield smashed through them, the staff's light burning away the pieces before they could reform. The second time, they came as a single massive shape, a wolf made of smoke and ember-red eyes. It lunged from an alley, jaws wide, but Steve met it head-on, shield braced. The impact rattled his bones, but the staff's light seared the beast, sending it howling back into the darkness. By the time he reached the southern tip of the island, the crystal's glow was almost blinding. He stood before a building that looked older than anything around it, a crumbling stone structure half buried beneath newer construction. Its facade was carved with symbols that matched the runes on Kael'thar's armor. The front doors were gone, replaced by a yawning archway that breathed cold air. Inside, the floor sloped downward into darkness. Steve descended. The air grew heavier, the walls narrowing until he had to turn sideways to pass. The hum was louder here, but it wasn't coming from above, it was coming from below. The tunnel opened into a vast underground chamber. Stone pillars rose into the darkness above, their surfaces carved with scenes of battles fought in light and shadow. At the far end, a staircase descended into a pit filled with a faint golden glow. Steve moved toward it and stopped. Something was moving in the shadows between the pillars. They stepped into the light, and Steve's breath caught. They were human, or had been once. Their skin was pale and cracked, their eyes black voids. They wore armor of ancient design, etched with the same shifting runes. Each carried a weapon, swords, spears, axes, all blackened as if burned. The guardians of the first city. They moved without a sound, fanning out to block his path. Steve raised his shield. The first one lunged, spear thrusting toward his chest. He deflected it with the shield and countered with a strike to the guardian's side. The blow landed solidly, but the guardian didn't fall. It simply turned its head toward him, expressionless, and attacked again. The fight was brutal. The guardians were fast, coordinated, and utterly relentless. Steve used every trick he knew, shield bashes, sweeps, feints, but they adapted quickly. The staff's light burned them, but only when it touched their skin directly. One by one, he forced them back, driving them toward the edges of the chamber. Finally, the last guardian fell, dissolving into dust that vanished into the air. He descended the staircase. At the bottom was a small, circular chamber. In its center, on a pedestal of white stone, rested the Heart of Dawn, a crystal sphere the size of a fist, glowing with pure golden light. The moment he stepped inside, the hum stopped. The silence was absolute. He reached out and lifted the heart. The light flared, flooding the chamber, and for a moment he felt everything. Warmth, strength, clarity. It was like standing in the sun after a lifetime in shadow. Then the floor shook. The walls split and shadows poured in. They didn't creep or glide this time. They surged a living tide of blackness. Kael'thar stepped through them, his jackal mask gleaming in the golden light. "You found it," he said. "Good. Now give it to me." Steve tightened his grip on the heart. "Not a chance." The warden's blade ignited with black fire. "Then I'll take it from your corpse." The fight was faster, harder than before. Kael'thar's strikes were precise and devastating, each one aimed to disarm or cripple. Steve countered with shield and staff, the heart's light burning the shadows that tried to flank him. But Kael'thar was stronger here, in the ruins of the first city. The shadows obeyed him instantly, forming walls, spikes, and chains to trap Steve. Steve broke free again and again, but each time it cost him ground. Finally, Kael'thar's blade struck the shield dead center, the force sending Steve sprawling. The heart rolled from his grasp, skittering across the floor. Kael'thar reached for it. Steve dove, grabbing the heart just as the warden's blade came down. The golden light flared, meeting the black fire in a blinding explosion. The shockwave hurled them both across the chamber. When Steve staggered to his feet, Kael'thar was gone, but the shadows were still closing in. He clutched the heart to his chest and ran, the crystal's light cutting a narrow path through the darkness. The guardians were gone. The pillars were crumbling. The entire ruin was collapsing. He burst into the open air just as the ground behind him gave way, swallowing the entrance. Above, the fortress loomed larger than ever. The Shadowfall was accelerating. Part End. P3. All right, Muhammad. Here's Part 3 of Captain America, Shadowfall, continuing directly from your Part 2 in the same 2,000-word cinematic high-engagement style. No hook at the start, and at the end, I will write only Part End. Part 3, into the Shadow Realm. The heart of dawn pulsed in Steve's grip, its golden light spilling across the ruined street. Above, the fortress in the sky had grown so massive it blotted out half the horizon. The ripple in the clouds was now a gaping wound, and from it poured a constant stream of shadow creatures, flooding the city like a living tide. The staff he'd taken from the old man was strapped to his back, its crystal dim compared to the heart's brilliance. The two relics resonated faintly together, their light pushing the darkness back just enough for him to move. But he knew it wouldn't last. The old man's warning echoed in his mind. To end the Shadowfall, you must take the fight into the Shadow Realm itself. The heart's glow shifted, pointing him toward the northern edge of the city. He moved quickly, weaving through streets littered with abandoned cars and the remnants of battles already lost. The shadows followed, always just beyond the edge of the light, whispering in voices that weren't human. Twice they attacked. The first time, they came as a swarm of winged shapes, their bodies like shredded cloth, their claws leaving trails of frost in the air. Steve's shield smashed through them, the heart's light burning away their forms. The second time, they came as a single massive serpent of smoke, its head crowned with jagged horns. It lunged from a rooftop, jaws wide, but Steve met it with a shield bash that sent it crashing into the pavement, where the heart's light dissolved it into nothing. The trail led him to the waterfront, into something impossible. A black archway stood at the edge of the pier, its surface rippling like liquid obsidian. The air around it was cold, the kind of cold that sank into your bones. The heart's light flared brighter, as if urging him forward. Steve stepped closer. The surface of the archway reflected nothing. Not the water, not the sky, not even him. It was a hole in reality. And then a voice spoke from behind him. "You're walking into his world, soldier." Steve turned. The old man was there, leaning on a cane, his eyes fixed on the archway. "I thought you were," Steve began. "Gone?" "Not yet," the old man said. "But my time is short. Once you cross, the rules change. The shadows will be stronger. The warden will be stronger. And the heart will be the only thing keeping you alive." Steve nodded. "Then I'd better not drop it." He stepped through. The world shifted instantly. The air was thick, heavy, and cold. The sky was a swirling mass of black and deep crimson, lit by flashes of distant lightning. The ground beneath his boots was cracked stone, stretching out into a landscape of jagged cliffs and rivers of shadow. The fortress loomed ahead, even larger here, its towers twisting into impossible shapes. Bridges of black stone connected it to floating shards of land, each one patrolled by shadow creatures. The heart's light pushed the darkness back, but only barely. Here, the shadows didn't retreat. They pressed against the edge of the glow, testing it, looking for weakness. The first attack came from above. A winged creature dove from the clouds, its body a mass of blades and smoke. Steve rolled aside as it struck, the impact shattering the stone where he'd been standing. He countered with a shield throw, the vibranium edge cutting through its wing. The creature screamed, dissolving into mist before it hit the ground. More came. Dozens. Steve fought his way forward, each step a battle. The heart's light burned the creatures, but they adapted quickly, circling just outside its reach and striking from the shadows. He reached the first bridge and found it guarded. Kaeldar stood at the far end, his jackal mask gleaming in the crimson light. His blade burned with black fire, the runes along its edge shifting like living things. "You've come far," the warden said, "but this is where your path ends." Steve tightened his grip on the heart. "Not until I end you." Kaeldar stepped forward, the shadows around him writhing like serpents. Then come, soldier. Let's see if your light can survive the dark. The fight was brutal. Kael'thar's strikes were faster here, his movements sharper, his blade leaving trails of shadow flame that lingered in the air. Steve blocked, countered, and pressed forward, but the warden met every attack with precision. The bridge shook under their feet as the battle raged. Shadow creatures swarmed from below, climbing the sides, their claws scraping against the stone. Steve kicked one back into the abyss, then ducked under a slash from Kael'thar and drove his shield into the warden's chest. The blow staggered him, but only for a moment. Kael'thar's blade came up in a vicious arc, catching Steve's shield and sending him skidding backward. The heart flared suddenly, its lights surging. The shadows recoiled, and for the first time, Kael'thar stepped back. Steve pressed the advantage, driving the warden toward the fortress gates. But before he could land the final blow, Kael'thar dissolved into smoke, reforming atop the wall. "You want the end, soldier?" he called down. "Then come and take it." The gates opened, and the shadows poured out. Steve gritted his teeth, tightened his grip on the heart, and charged. The siege of the Black Fortress. The gates of the Black Fortress yawned open like the jaws of some ancient beast, and from them poured the warden's army. The shadows here were different, denser, sharper, their forms more defined. They moved with the precision of soldiers, their armor forged from the same black steel as Kael'thar's, their weapons dripping with the same black fire. Steve Rogers tightened his grip on the heart of dawn. Its golden light pulsed in his palm, pushing the darkness back in a narrow circle. The staff on his back hummed faintly, resonating with the heart, but here in the shadow realm, the light felt strained. The bridge behind him was already crumbling, chunks of stone falling into the abyss. There was no retreat. The first wave hit like a tidal surge. Steve met them head-on, shield smashing into the lead soldier, sending it tumbling into the void. He pivoted, swinging the heart's light toward a cluster of spear-wielders. The golden flare burned through their armor, their bodies unraveling into smoke. But for every one that fell, two more took its place. The fortress walls loomed closer, their surfaces crawling with shadow creatures that clung like insects. Above, towers twisted into the crimson sky, their spires tipped with jagged black crystal that pulsed in time with the fortress's heartbeat. A roar split the air. From the gate emerged something massive, a war beast of pure shadow, its body shaped like a lion but with 6 legs and a head crowned with horns. Its eyes burned red, and each step shook the bridge. Steve braced as it charged. The impact rattled his bones, driving him back several steps. He ducked under a swipe of its claws and slammed his shield into its jaw. The beast staggered but didn't fall. It lunged again, jaws snapping. Steve jammed the heart forward, the golden light flaring. The beast howled, its form flickering, and Steve used the opening to leap onto its back. He drove the shield down into the base of its skull, the light searing through it. The beast dissolved beneath him, collapsing into a cloud of smoke that drifted away on the wind. The army hesitated, and then Kael'thar stepped through the gate. Here, in his realm, the warden was even more imposing. His armor was darker, the runes along its surface glowing like molten metal. His jackal mask seemed alive, the eyes burning with a light that wasn't fire. The black flame blade in his hand hummed with power, the air around it warping. "You've come far, soldier," he said, his voice carrying across the bridge. "But this is where your light dies." Steve didn't answer. He stepped forward, the heart's glow brightening. The clash was instant. Kael'thar's strikes were faster than ever, each one heavy enough to crack stone. Steve blocked, countered, and pressed forward, but the warden's blade drank the light, dimming the heart with every clash. The fortress itself seemed to join the fight. Spikes of black stone erupted from the ground, forcing Steve to dodge. Chains of shadow lashed from the walls, trying to ensnare him. Steve broke free again and again, but Kael'thar was relentless, driving him toward the fortress gates. Then Steve saw it, the black crystal spires above the gate. They pulsed in time with the warden's movements. The fortress was feeding him. Steve feinted left, then hurled his shield upward. The vibranium disc spun through the air, striking one of the spires dead center. The crystal shattered, releasing a burst of black smoke that dissipated into the sky. Kaeldar staggered, his blade faltering for a heartbeat. Steve pressed the attack, driving the warden back step by step. But before he could land the final blow, Kaeldar slammed his blade into the ground. The bridge cracked. The stone beneath Steve's feet gave way, and he fell. The abyss swallowed him, the wind tearing at his armor. He clutched the heart to his chest, its light the only thing keeping the darkness from closing in completely. Then, with a bone-jarring impact, he landed on a lower platform, a massive balcony jutting from the fortress's side. Above, Kaeldar looked down at him. "You want the heart to reach my throne? Then climb, soldier. Climb through the dark." The gates above slammed shut. Steve looked up at the sheer wall of black stone, crawling with shadow creatures. The climb would be a battle in itself. He adjusted his grip on the heart, set his jaw, and began to ascend.